Hello, Algebra 2A. Welcome to Lesson 31, where we are going to take a look at multiplying and dividing rational expressions. And we're going to review how to multiply fractions and divide fractions. And then secondly, we're going to remind everyone how to evaluate an expression, because we'll be looking at that as well. So first, multiplying fractions. When you are multiplying, you are going to simply multiply across your numerators, multiply across your denominators. But before you do that, you can also factor common factors out. So if you look at a numerator denominator like 3 and 9, since they're both divisible by 3, you can divide that 3 out. 3 divided by 3 becomes 1. 9 divided by 3 becomes a 3. Same with 10 and 5. So 10 and 5 have a common 5 in it. So we're going to take 5 divided by 5, which is 1, and 10 divided by 5, which is 2. And now we are ready to multiply across. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 3 is 6. So that ends up being 1/6. Now to divide fractions, you don't actually divide at all. You multiply by the reciprocal. So to divide by 1/20th, that is the same as timesing by 20 over 1. So there's different methods and things. Some use the KFC. You keep the first fraction, you flip the divide to multiply, and then you change this to its reciprocal. But anyway, you still see the same idea up here as if you have common factors. So that 20 would become a 4, and then that 5 would become a 1 because they're both divisible by 5. Now we're ready to multiply across. 2 times 4 is 8. 1 times 1 is 1. 8 over 1 ends up being 8. So there would be our result. And then lastly, evaluating. So down here we have 4xy to the third. X is 3, y is -2. So I'm going to go 4. X is 3. And then y is -2. So you all know that you take the number, you put it in for the variable. I just want to remind you that anytime you put a number in for a variable, put it into parentheses. And then you can just type that into your calculator, and you're going to end up getting negative 96 when you put that in. So make sure that you are putting those numbers into parentheses when you start to replace them. Okay, now we're going to start multiplying rational expressions, which are going to be fractions that have polynomials. So looking at example 1, we are going to multiply and then evaluate for a is 3, b is 4. Now it might be tempting to just take the 3 and the 4 and put them in right away, but we are going to look to use our simplifying techniques before we start to do that. So first, start with the numbers. So you see you have a 6 here, and then you have a 4 here. Since those are both even, they're both divisible by 2. So we're going to simplify those to 3 and 2. And then you have a 21, which is divisible by 7. And then you also have a 7, which is divisible by 7. So that would become a 3 and a 1. Okay, next we can look at up in our numerator. So we're going to keep track of some things going on. Up in our numerator, you have a to the third. And then over here you have an a. So you have 4 a's going on. Now the 4 a's up in the numerator are going to cancel with the 5 a's down in the denominator. Now 4 a's, there's less a's up in the numerator, so all of those are going to cancel. And then down in your denominator, you'll still have 1 a remaining. Now up in my numerator, I look at my b's. I've got b3 and b to the 4th. That's going to be b to the 7th. That's going to cancel out with b to the 5th down here. So these 5 b's in the denominator will cancel out 5 in the numerator. I still have a b squared left in my numerator. Now we can multiply it out. We're going to have 9b squared over 2a. And then once we have the simplified, we can start to plug in our values. We'll have a 9 times 4 squared over 2 times 3, which is going to be 144 over 6, which is 24. So we end up getting an answer of 24 for that problem. So we start by simplifying our rational expression as much as possible to get that 9b squared over 2a, and then we're ready to start plugging in our values. If we start to plug in our values before simplifying, we're going to get some huge numbers. So b to the third, b to the fourth. You get some really big numbers that are hard to work with. Part B, we're going to multiply, then identify all values of x that make the expression undefined. So something in the warm-up that we didn't do, but undefined is any value for x that makes the denominator 0. So we're going to start there. So we're going to take our denominator values, x squared minus 4, find out what that is to make it 0. And this I'm finding those excluded values. And then I'll take x squared minus 6x plus 9 and set it equal to 0. So this x squared minus 4, you should recognize that from yesterday. That's a difference of squares. So we were practicing that yesterday. X plus 2, x minus 2 equals 0. And then I take each of those expressions, those factors, set it equal to 0. Well, since I could just kind of use mental math, what number plus 2 would equal 0? That's going to be negative 2. What number minus 2 is 0? That's going to be positive 2. So that one I get negative 2 and 2. Then over here, I've got an x squared minus 6x plus 7. So here I'm using the factoring strategy from yesterday where I have an a term of 1. What multiplies to positive 9 adds to negative 6. That's going to be x minus 3. X minus 3. And since they're both the exact same, that's going to mean that my excluded value is just going to be a positive 3, because I'm just looking for what number minus 3 would equal to 0. That would be 3. 3 minus 3 is 0. So there are my excluded values. Yep. Yep. Yeah. All right, so what can you do to multiply to negative 8 and then add to 7? One will have to be positive, one negative. Nope. Try 8 and 1. So positive 8 and then negative 1 will multiply to negative 8, and then they'll add to 7. Okay? All right, I'm going to go back. I'm going to finish up my video. I should be done in a couple of minutes, okay? All right, after getting your excluded values, next thing you can do is start to simplify. So now we're going to factor everything. So I look at 15x minus 5x squared. So one thing that we will do is we will factor using GCFs. Now I have an x squared here. I want to make sure that the highest degree term goes first. So I'm thinking of this as negative 5x squared plus 15x. So I'm going to factor out a negative 5. So I have a negative 5 factoring out. That's going to make my first term positive. Then I look, they both have an x in common, so I'm taking a negative 5x out. That's going to make this first term x, because I take negative 5x squared divided by negative 5x, which the negative 5 will cancel out. And then I'm just left with an x. And then 15 divided by negative 5 would be negative 3. And then the x's will cancel. So there's going to be my 15x minus 5x squared. Denominator is already factored. I already did that. X plus 2, x minus 2. Another trinomial up in this numerator over here. So this one I'm going to look at what multiplies to 6, adds to negative 5. That's going to be x minus 2, x minus 3. And then in my denominator, I already factored this. That was x minus 3 and x minus 3. So similar to what we started with in our warm-up with numbers, we're looking for those common factors to simplify things down. With polynomials, we get it factored, and then once it's factored, now we can start to simplify things out. So up here, I'm going to look at, I have an x minus 3, that's going to cancel out with an x minus 3. Here I have an x minus 2, that's going to cancel out this x minus 2. Here I have an x minus 3, that's going to cancel out with that x minus 3. So really, all I have left is a negative 5x over x plus 2. So there would be my final simplified answer. In our last one, in the essence of time, I've got my x plus 3. That's already in simplest form. My denominator, I have an x in common, so the x factors out times that x plus 3. Now I'm going to work on factoring this trinomial. So I need to somehow multiply to 5x squared and a negative 3 with my first and last, but then add up to 14. So my firsts have to be a 5 and a 1. And then to get to negative 3, I have to use a positive 3, negative 1, or negative 3, positive 1. But what I'm seeing is if my outsides, if I put the 5x and a 3 on the outside, that's going to multiply to positive 15. And then on the inside, if I put a 1 times negative 1, that's going to multiply to negative 1x. So what I'm looking at is my two factors are going to be 5x plus 3. Oops, excuse me. Erase that. It'd be 5x minus 1. I would go straight across. So my 3 is my outside. So 5x minus 1 and then x plus 3. So if I look at that, my outsides, 5x times 3, give me 15x. Insides, negative 1 times x gives me negative x. So those two would add up to 14x. Now I'm ready to put those in. So I've got a 5x minus 1 and an x plus 3. Now from there, I look, I've got x plus 3 up here. I've got an x plus 3 down here. Nothing else in common. So I'm going to go over here to write my answer. I'll put it in blue. It's going to be x plus 3 times 5x minus 1 all over x. So there's no anything in common for that x to simplify with. And there it is. So there would be my final simplified answer. So the moral of the story, as we start to multiply these out, we are looking to get them factored first. Once they're factored, then we can start to look for those common factors and simplify things down. So that concludes day 1, and we're now ready for our day 1 lesson 31 assignment. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.